Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Carolyn Augusted. I'm the dietitian with ISU Dining. And welcome to another one of our nutritional download sessions. This is our semi-monthly webinar and chat series that we've been doing to bring nutrition information to all of you students and to make sure that you get connected with our nutrition resources here on campus. So tonight's discussion, Sierra Weldon, who is our current student nutrition assistant, she is a graduating senior in dietetics this May, will be leading today's session talking about hydration. So Sierra, I will throw it over to you.
Awesome. So tonight we are going to be talking about water. Again, as a reminder, all of these are posted to the website, so you can go back and look at them later. If you tuned in last month, you know that we talked about fiber. And then tonight, if you want to go back and look at our hydration presentation, definitely feel free to do so. Again, like Helen said, my name is Sierra. I'm currently a senior in dietetics, and I am the student nutrition assistant. And then Callan, of course, is the ISU Dining registered dietitian here on campus. And so her social media is ISU Dining RD on Instagram if you are interested in following her. She posts a lot of pictures of meals and balanced plates and offers tips for ways that you can incorporate different food groups into your meals. So why choose water? So of course we know that water is really important for some of our bodily functions, and water makes up about 60 to 70% of our body. So it's really important that we are replenishing that water throughout the day that we're losing. So some of the different functions of water within the body are to absorb and transport those nutrients within our bloodstream. It helps to cool our bodies. So when we're exercising, just making sure that we're increasing that fluid to replace the fluid that we're losing with our sweat. It helps to remove waste and toxins. So maybe thinking about when you're like urination or like vomiting, helping to get rid of some of those toxins. Maybe if you had like food poisoning or something like that. Regulates our body temperature. Again, this kind of goes along with the cooling our body during exercise. Lubrication, so for our joints, and then the formation of important bodily fluids like saliva and tears. So the fluid recommendations, these are just some general recommendations for the population. So for women or people who were assigned female at birth, the recommendation would be 11.5 cups per day. And then for men or people who were assigned male at birth, the recommendation would be 15.5 cups a day. There are different ways that you can calculate fluid recommendations based on your body weight that might be more specific to you, maybe if you're an athlete or things like that. But these are just kind of some brief overview for recommendations in general. And then it's really important to recognize that fluid recommendations are not just plain water. It does include all the different fluids that we're able to drink. So it might include fluid that we find within our food, foods that have high water content like fruits and vegetables, but also all the different beverages that we drink throughout the day as well. And so, of course, plain water or water in general might be the best way to meet some of those fluid recommendations, but you can also consider those other fluids to count towards your daily intake. So here's just kind of a brief overview of some of the fluids that might count towards the recommendation. Again, it's mostly all of them that we might consume throughout the day. So this might include tea, sparkling water, juice, sports drinks, milk, soda, or coffee. You might have heard people say that you need to consume like 8 cups of water throughout the day. But again, this is all fluids. So coffee, sometimes people say like that might be dehydrating, which can be true, but it's not really going to offset dehydration. So you still get the benefit of hydrating if you do drink that coffee, which is why it still counts towards that recommendation. And right there it says coffee might be a diuretic. Well, coffee is a diuretic, but a diuretic is just something that is going to promote water loss through urination. And so that is usually found in coffee or caffeinated beverages. So just keep that in mind when you're considering your fluids throughout the day. The one fluid that isn't going to count towards that recommendation is going to be alcohol. Alcohol, again, is a diuretic, so it is going to promote some water loss through urination, but specifically alcohol wouldn't count because it is going to decrease the hormone, anti-diuretic hormone, which functions in the nephron of the kidney to hold on to water. So the main role of that hormone is to retain water. It's kind of your body's last chance to hold on to water if you're needing it. And because when you drink alcohol, that's going to be reduced, you are going to retain a little bit less water. And so that's, of course, going to increase your risk for dehydration. So again, we talked about the fluid in food and how you can meet those recommendations with the water content coming from fruits and vegetables and other foods. So here's just a brief overview of some of the foods that are high in water. So we've got some fruits like bananas, grapes, oranges, pears, pineapple, but quite a bit of fruits are high in water. Some vegetables like carrots, cooked broccoli, or avocados, and then some dairy foods like yogurt or cottage cheese. So here's just a little graphic that I found that I thought kind of gave a good overview of hydration in general. To the left, I gave a little draw your attention to the little circle that says don't wait until you're thirsty to start drinking water. This is because usually when you start to feel thirsty, you're already at the point of being dehydrated. And so it's really important that we're just remembering to drink throughout the day, drink those fluids consistently and kind of sipping throughout the day, because usually you're already dehydrated by the time that you start to feel physical thirst. It also says one sign of proper hydration is the color of your urine. So urine can also be a good indicator of your hydration status. And so we want to usually aim for like a pale yellow color to clear. And then usually if it's like a golden or darker yellow color, we are probably dehydrated and should consider consuming a little bit more water throughout our day. Again, alcohol should be avoided because it does have that diuretic effect. And then minimizing the number of beverages within caffeine. Again, like a few cups of coffee isn't going to hurt you because that hydration is still going to count towards that recommendation. But if you continue to consume too many drinks that have caffeine in them, it might start to have that diuretic effect. And then to the right is just some examples of foods that have a high water content. So dehydration, of course, we've heard about this. It's usually just a measure of your intake to your outtake. So losing more fluids than you take in. And of course, if this gets extreme, this could be very dangerous. So fluid is going to be lost in a few different ways. It's not just going to be lost through urination. So you will lose fluid through sweat, tears, urination, vomiting, and then of course, diarrhea, which can actually be pretty fatal too. So there's two different types of losses and ways that you lose fluid. So insensible losses are going to be things that are not very easily measured. And so those will be the fluids that you lose through evaporation through your skin or tears or sweat. It's going to be harder to measure that intake output because they're just kind of happening all the time throughout the day. And then those sensible losses are going to be things that are easily measured. So urination, defecation, things that you can easily measure, and they won't be, happening all the time throughout the day. It is important because those insensible losses, they do account for a smaller percentage of the water that you lose, but they should be replaced because you are losing them every single day. So it is important that we replace those, even though we might not lose them as much as some of those sensible losses. So a few signs of dehydration, we talked about a little of these earlier. So little or no urine, urine that is darker than usual. And then some physical signs might be having a dry mouth. It might be feeling tired or have fatigue, having severe thirst, or maybe you start to get dizzy and you have a headache, things start to get blurry. That might also be a sign of dehydration as well. So other sources of water, this is kind of just a good visual for seeing the water content of different foods. As you can see, a lot of these are fruits and vegetables, but this isn't something that you're going to find on the nutrition label. And so I thought this was kind of a good graphic just to show because you might not see this every day. So cucumbers, strawberries, cantaloupes, lettuce, watermelon, those are all going to have 90% or more of a water content. So might be some things that you could consider incorporating into your day. If maybe you're not the biggest fan of drinking water, maybe consider getting some of those fluid recommendations through your food. So exercise and hydration. So if you exercise, of course, that's going to increase your the fluid that you need because you're going to sweat more and you're going to lose more of that fluid through your skin. And so just making sure that before, during, and after you exercise, you are replacing those losses. If it's hotter outside and you are exercising maybe in the summertime, or maybe you're just a person who sweats a little bit more, just making sure that you're also increasing the water to fit those different temperatures and how much you're sweating. And then if your exercise is high intensity, or if you are exercising for more than an hour, you might want to consider including a sports drink like G2 to help replace some of those electrolytes like sodium, potassium, chloride, those different minerals that you might lose because usually if you're exercising for more than an hour, you're going to start losing some of those as well. So usually water is okay up until an hour, and it's actually the preferred fluid for exercise. But once you start exercising a little bit more or having higher intensity, you just might want to consider replacing some of those electrolytes. So a few strategies for staying hydrated. If you find water to be a little bit boring, these might be a little bit helpful for you. So adding fruit to your water. So this might be things like cut up lemons or strawberries, blueberries. Honestly, any kind of fruit is pretty good in water. They have these at the dining centers actually. Sometimes they'll have like a pineapple water or like an orange water. And so it kind of just gives a little bit more flavor to the water if you find the taste of regular tap water to be a little bit bland, not have very much flavor. You might consider water enhancers. So you might have seen some of those little like noon hydration tablets to put in your water, little powders or packets like Crystal Light, or some drops like the Mio drops. Those can just add a little bit more flavor to your water as well. Consider carrying a reusable water bottle. So I really like this one to the right here because it kind of shows you the times of the day and keeps you on track for regulating your water intake. And so I actually have one of these. It's a little bit bigger in size, but it's really good to use just so you might like look at the clock and be like, oh, it's 11 o'clock, and you might not have had like any water throughout the day. So it's kind of just reminding you constantly to remember to drink your water when you carry around your water bottle. Downloading an app. So there's different apps for regulating your water intake, and you can track it throughout the day. The next slide, I've also got an example of some different apps that you might use. And then, of course, eating your water, like we talked about with some of those fruits and vegetables or dairy products that might be a little bit higher in water. So here are a few examples of some apps that you could use to track your water. This one to the top left is called Water Reminder. And so it just kind of shows you how much water you're drinking throughout the day, and then how close you are towards your daily recommendation or your goal. So you kind of just log in the water, what time you drink it, and then it shows you how close you are to meeting that daily recommendation. This is probably based on weight. Some of them are based on weight, height, things like that. The one to the bottom left is called Plant Nanny, which is kind of a fun way to regulate your water intake. It kind of just encourages you to do it. So you will log in your water, and then it will help your plant to grow. So there's a little plant, and then when you log in your water, that will help water the plant and help to make it grow. And so you can see how tall your plants get throughout the day. And then the one to the right is called Waterlogged. This is just another way to do it. It has different containers that you can log, which is really nice depending on what you're drinking from. And then it kind of just, again, shows you like the time that you drink it and how close you are to meeting your goal for the day. So a little bit of water fun facts, because water is so important within our bodies. And so drinking water can actually help reduce cavities because it helps you to produce saliva. And so saliva plays a really important role in oral health and keeping our mouths clean. It is good for hydration to prevent some arthritis. So we talked a little bit earlier about that lubrication effect of water within our bodies. And so when we're decreasing the friction between our joints, we are increasing our lubrication, which can help to prevent arthritis. And then, of course, every part of our body needs water to function. When we think about our skin and kind of the integrity and elasticity of our skin, and all of the different organs that use water, it really does play an important role in our body function. Okay, so that concludes the presentation. We have some time for a question and answer session, and so feel free to put some of your questions into the chat box, and then Callan's going to monitor that, and we can go from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Sierra. Yeah, anyone, please put down any questions you have in the chat box. Also, I forgot earlier to introduce Kylie. So you see that we have another person with us kind of on the panelist at the top here. So Kylie is going to be, is currently training right now with Sierra and I, and will be our new nutrition student assistant next year. So Kylie joined us today on kind of the panelist area. So she will help me a little bit with monitoring the chat box there. So we do have one first question. And so the question says, do cooked vegetables have more water than raw vegetables?
Okay, so I don't even know if I know the full answer to this, but usually when you cook vegetables, like you might even like add some water. Like when I cook vegetables, I might add some water and then cook it in the microwave. And so you see a lot of that water like seep out. But I mean, I don't think you wouldn't like increase the amount of water that you have from a cooked vegetable. Eating raw vegetables is a perfectly great source of getting some of that water. It kind of also just depends on your preferences and how you like to eat your vegetables. So of course, if you don't like to eat raw vegetables, then go ahead and cook your vegetables and you're still going to get the benefit of that water. But I guess I don't know, like scientifically, Callan, if you do like increase or decrease the amount of water depending on the preparation of the vegetable.
I feel like it varies a little bit more for like type of vegetable as well as type of cooking preparation method. So like if you boil something, some water might seep in to that food versus if you roast something, you know, having like a water-based method, a dry heat method versus a dry heat method versus a wet heat method of cooking. And even with that, like it kind of varies technically like preparation or prepping of different fruits or vegetables if you dehydrate them. Obviously, if you dehydrate fruits or vegetables, like that's become like a thing lately for like, you know, I see like dehydrated mango like everywhere. Obviously, that doesn't have any water in it because it's been completely dehydrated out. But when it comes towards like other cooking or preparation methods, it really kind of varies per fruit, per vegetable, as well as per preparation method.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think of like the roasting, like things start to shrivel up. So you can like visibly see things start to get a little bit smaller too. So
yeah, yeah. Awesome. We do have another question. And so this question states, what fruits do you recommend adding to water? Fruits that don't cause maybe too much like acid reflux or GERD affection or reaction with that. Any ideas with that, Sierra?
yeah, so I think maybe if you are worried about the acidity, maybe not like oranges or lemons or things like that. I personally really like strawberries, but I also like to just buy like sparkling flavored water as well. But that does have like carbon dioxide, so that might increase like, I don't know, like belching and acidity and things like that. But I really like strawberries. I feel like they give a really subtle flavor. And blueberries as well. But yeah, honestly, all fruits go pretty well in water. It kind of just is up to your preferences. But I would say like reducing the citrusy, like oranges, lemons, if you aren't wanting to have that effect of like acid coming up.
One that I really like to do is just mint. Putting just mint in your water, that's not specifically like a fruit, but it can
Mhm.
still affect the flavor and make it like a minty fun thing as
Mhm.
well. hmm so we have another question that says like, is it true that water with gas dehy is it true that water with gas dehydrates you instead of hydrates you? Like a sparkling water. An example is like the Perrier water. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Oh. Mhm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I wouldn't say that it would dehydrate you just because all of those, I mean, it's still fluid, so it's still going to count towards that fluid recommendation. So, of course, there might be choices that are going to hydrate you a little bit more, like we talked about with those diuretics, but it's still not going to offset the benefit that you would get from drinking them. So, I would say kind of whatever fluids you enjoy, go ahead and drink those because it's still going to be important for meeting some of those recommendations. So I think not regulating it too much and being like, oh, I need to have just plain water to get all the benefits of hydration because you really can meet it in a lot of different ways.
I agree, Sierra. Yeah, for a while when a lot of those like carbonated, like flavored waters or things were coming out, there was this big thing of like, oh, it actually dehydrates you. And I feel like that was just kind of like a myth going around, another like fad thing.
Mhm.
But it can be confusing for sure, especially if it is like a carbonated water with that carbon dioxide kind of like in it,
Mhm.
with that extra gas creating the bubbles. And sometimes we think of like, oh, well, soda kind of dehydrates you. It's carbonated. And so the commonalities between like a soda being dehydrated versus like a carbonated water being dehydrated, it can be a little confusing with that. But I agree. It's just water with some bubbles in it. The carbonation doesn't necessarily mean that it is dehydrating. It very like what Sierra mentioned earlier, it might increase some like belching or it might increase a little bit of other like digestive or gastro-related activity, but it's not necessarily dehydrating in that manner. Okay, so we do have another question. What type of electrolytes does water have?
Um, I don't know. So I don't know the specific electrolytes that water might have, but the electrolytes in general would be like sodium, potassium, chloride, magnesium. So usually, like the main like sodium, potassium, chloride are going to be like kind of come like in groups. They'll usually be added like together. Like if it's in like a sports drink or something like that, you'll usually find electrolytes together because they all like work with each other in the kidneys. And so I don't know. So water in general, plain water, um, I don't know. Will you find electrolytes in those? Just plain tap water?
Typically not in just like tap water. I
Hmm.
feel like it's becoming a lot more common because of like smart water, right? It's like water with
Yeah.
electrolytes, or like even if it's not super flavored, same thing with like Propel or some of those like beverages like that. But typically with just like straight from the tap, then there isn't really as much, or they're at pretty low levels that they're not super detectable.
Hmm.
Cool. So, there was another question that came in,
Hmm.
related to like high blood pressure. So what the question states is, I struggle a little bit with high blood pressure, but my sister struggles with low blood pressure.
Hmm.
Does water really make a difference, compared to high and low blood pressures?
Yeah, so water is kind of the main thing with blood pressure. It's kind of a balance between those electrolytes and water. So there's a whole kind of system, a whole thing that kind of goes on in your kidneys to help you regulate water. And so it's a balance between those hormones, those electrolytes, and water. So it might not. So let's say you have increased sodium, that might increase your blood pressure. So again, just kind of knowing your intake between water and then also some of those other things that affect water within your body might be important as well. But yeah, they do work together to regulate that blood volume and blood pressure.
Awesome. And I did have another question come to me privately. And it says, do you lose more like fluid from your body from using like a sauna or a steam room?
Oh, I actually have no idea the answer to that. I've been in a sauna before, but I guess I don't even know the difference between the two.
So typically what I know anyways is like a sauna is like a dry heat versus a steam
Uh-huh.
room is like a wet heat. Kind of like when we talked
Okay.
about those like dry heat like cooking methods and like the wet heat
Oh
cooking
yeah.
methods. And so like a steam room, it's hot water, it's like steam.
Uh-huh.
Versus a sauna is very dry. So I guess I don't know for sure. I'm not an
Mhm.
expert on this. I could look this up. But I would assume that maybe you'd lose less water from the steam room um, because there's extra water in there being heated up.
Mhm.
But any
That's
other
interesting.
thoughts? Yeah. Oh, there was one other question that came in quickly.
Hmm.
And they asked, this is about those like diuretic beverages, Sierra, that you
Yep.
mentioned earlier. Like
Hmm.
the question specifically kind of asks, how can alcohol be a diuretic? And so can coffee, but alcohol is the only one that decreases your hydration and coffee doesn't affect it.
Yes. So let me actually go back, see if I can go back to that slide. It might take me a while. Um, but so alcohol is going to have that major effect on the anti-diuretic hormone. And so it's specifically going to affect the hormone that retains water. Oh, did I pass it? Yes. Okay. So ADH. So that functions in the nephron of the kidney. And so it's kind of your body's last chance to hold on to that water. And so when you're drinking alcohol, it's going to reduce that hormone. And so you're just going to keep excreting that water. So that is why alcohol specifically is going to not count towards that hydration because of the effect on that specific hormone. So the other caffeinated drinks might have that diuretic effect, but it's not going to be as significant because it's not going to affect that hormone as significantly as alcohol would.
And I feel like for that, it's like if you have like a coffee or like a black tea occasionally, then totally good. Like, a
Mhm.
cup or two a day. But if you're having like a couple of, like pots a day, that's where it might have more of a diuretic effect because of how much of that like threshold kind of affects that anti-diuretic hormone that's in the kidneys with all of that. So again, definitely like include these other beverages, include the tea, include the coffee, because it doesn't affect as much as some other beverages, like how alcohol affects our body in that way. But also making sure that, if we go overboard a little bit, we could definitely feel a little bit more of like a physical difference as well.
Mhm. And also, like, it also depends on how you're drinking your coffee. So black coffee might have a little bit more diuretic effect than like a latte because a latte would have milk in it, and milk has a lot of water. So it also kind of depends on the different variations of drinks that you're having as well. So.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really great point to bring up. Okay, the questions have slowed down a little bit. If there's any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, whether it's to everyone or just privately to me. Actually, Sarah, I had something that floated through my mind earlier, and I don't know if
Mhm.
this is like a silly thought to have or not. But when
Uh-huh.
you were talking about some of the foods that kind of counted towards hydration status and towards water
Mhm.
content, what came to my mind is I was like, huh, I wonder if like other foods that are like seafood maybe
Mhm.
count because, like shrimp are like have water content as part of them. Same thing with a lot of fishes, or same thing with like if we have like seaweed that's not dehydrated,
Hmm.
if the way that those foods just kind of absorb or have that extra water or have that extra fluid in them, affects or potentially might count. It's probably not as much as like, oranges or watermelon or some of those other fruits or vegetables, or
Hmm.
dairy products. But that was also one thing that kind of that floated through my brain a little bit.
Hmm. And like those seafoods, it might not be something that you specifically like eat to increase your water. Like if you're wanting to increase your water, you might go for like the fruits and vegetables. But certainly, I feel like a lot of foods have water that we maybe don't realize is contributing to that fluid recommendation. Um, so also just keeping that in mind too, with whatever foods you eat, it might include water, but it might just not be significant enough for you to maybe realize that too. So.
Yeah, and that's even when we were talking about the question about like raw versus cooked vegetables, what might have more content. That what one thing that also floated through my mind was about like how we cook or how we prepare like pasta or quinoa or rice, right?
Hmm.
Those are naturally just like kind of dehydrated products. And so we
Hmm.
have to rehydrate them. Same thing with like dried beans.
Hmm.
That's how they come in like a bag versus like if you get beans in the can, if they're canned beans, then they're already hydrated, but you have to hydrate the beans. And then you have to hydrate the pasta, you have to hydrate the rice, hydrate the quinoa, hydrate any
Hmm.
other grains, kind of like that during the cooking process. But that's actually to get it so that it's in an edible form, more edible form for humans to actually consume at that manner, but also kind of making it so that it is easier for us to digest and absorb all of the other nutrients, because of it being in a more edible form.
Hmm. My mind actually was thinking about oatmeal too.
Ah,
Just
yeah.
because there are so
Mhm.
many foods that just like absorb water that you don't really think about. So yeah, it's kind of cool to think about the different preparation methods and how that might affect the water that you're getting too. So
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, there haven't been any other questions the last couple of minutes. So we will sign off. Sierra, anything else that you want to say?
no, I think we're all good. Just make sure to check out the website if you're interested in learning a little bit more or checking out some of our past presentations. We have quite a bit of presentations on like we've done protein before, we've done like nourishing for the summertime before. So there's a lot of great content on the website if you're interested in learning a little bit more. So thank you for joining us tonight, everybody.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. And again, this nutritional download session and all previous ones are recorded, and then they are put on the ISU Dining website underneath the nutrition tab. And then you can also find it on the ISU Dining YouTube page. That's where it's kind of housed at for all of us. But thank you all so much for joining us. As always, feel free to reach out with any other questions or suggestions. This will be and is our last nutritional download session for the school year. So everyone have a great summer, and we'll see you in the fall. Bye.
Bye.